So if you've been on my channel at all, you know that I talk quite a bit about Coursera as a really valuable tool for online learning, and I also talk about stocks. These two worlds of mine are meeting because Coursera announced their IPO back in early March, and they finally went public at $33 a share. And in this video, I'm going to give you some idea of what this company is all about and whether it's a good investment. So stay tuned. Hey folks, Richard Walls here, and if we're meeting for the first time, what this channel is all about is helping you with career development and personal finance. So if you want to advance your career and grow your income, then consider subscribing down below and hitting the notification bell so you get notified of when I post new content. So with that said, let's talk about the Coursera IPO. So on March 5th, Coursera announced that they were going to file for an IPO, and they finally went public at $33 a share, and it's since gone up. The initial valuation was around $4.3 billion, and that was based on some previous rounds of funding that they had gone through. So since they went public, the share price has actually climbed to over $40, but is it really worth that much? And what does the future look like for them? So I'm going to walk through a few key points. Number one is, what is their business model? Number two is, what does Coursera do well? 3 is financials, 4 competitors, 5 risks, and 6, do I think it's worth looking into as an investment? Let's start with their business model. What they have is a freemium model whereby they offer a ton of content for free with the hopes that people that visit and explore the free content then elect to look into and potentially purchase some of the paid content that they offer. And as far as paid options go, Coursera has a lot of content in that way as well. Let's talk about that really quick. The paid options range from relatively inexpensive certificates for courses you can take. Essentially, you take a course, and if you elect a certificate, then that basically means that Coursera verifies that you did the course, you went through the content, and you passed it. This is something that's more or less verifiable or verified by Coursera, and that's something you can put on your resume or LinkedIn. And those don't cost a whole lot. Those cost in the tens of dollars. So I think it depends on the class, but they can be anywhere from $75 to, and the price goes up higher depending on the course. And it goes all the way up to full-fledged degree programs. And these are in partnership with universities that cost a few tens of thousands of dollars, which, by the way, the options that they have for degrees in partnership with these universities are far less expensive than pretty much most of the on-campus programs that exist today. Now, what makes Coursera disruptive in the education market is their reframing of how education is valued by not only the student but also employers. And they're democratizing education by providing some affordable options. Like I mentioned a moment ago, you of course have course certificates, and then you have full-fledged degrees, and in between you have what they term master tracks, and these are effectively a series of courses devoted to a certain skill. And the cost of master tracks is a fraction of the cost of most traditional methods. If you don't want to pursue a degree because you don't have the time or the financial resources to do so, a master track is that in-between sweet spot for getting that skill and being more marketable to employers. And one of the arguments that Coursera makes, among many other players in the education space, really is, it used to be the case where you go to school for 2 to 4 years, you get a degree, and then you work the rest of your career, and the skills that you obtained from your education, of course, then also with your experience on the job, that's going to carry you your entire career. In today's technology-driven, rapidly changing environment, the competitiveness of any one individual in the job market is really quite challenged every few years because there are new skills that become required. And if those people aren't learning these new skills, when it comes time to advance their career or even change careers, they're at a disadvantage. So like I mentioned before, the solution would have been to let me go back to school, let me get this new degree, let me get this new skill so I can advance my career or change my career. But what if I were to say to you that instead of doing that, what if I said that you can get the skills that you need for a fraction of the time and a fraction of the cost, and you can continue to keep working, you can continue to have an income. And in doing so, you ensure that you stay relevant and competitive in the job market for years to come. Would that be something of interest to you? Like, consensus is yes. I mean, it certainly is to me, and that's why I talk about it on my channel quite a bit. And I hope it is to you as well. And the Coursera financials would suggest the same. The most recent financials from Coursera show that they generated $294 million in 2020, which is up 59% year over year. Now, given what happened last year with the disruption that many universities saw, the number is probably higher than it would have been naturally, but it still would have been up significantly. Now, behind that revenue, there's also a margin number, which doesn't look that great. Their net loss was $67 million in 2020, which is up 43% year over year. So a bit of a good sign for this particular period of time where revenue is outpacing cost increases. That said, Coursera has never had a profitable year since their launch in 2012. And this is not unusual for most tech companies during its early growth stage, but it is something to note. And obviously at some point the company have to be profitable at some point in the future. And to cap it off, Coursera has a user base of 77 million, where in 2020, the user base increased by a whopping 65%. And to be clear, they're not all paid users. A lot of them access the free content. So hopefully in their first quarterly report about a quarter from now, they can give a little bit more detail on how many users are paid users and how many are not. Now, as far as competition goes, there's actually a substantial amount of competition, and they're coming from a lot of different places, but some of the more direct competitors are companies like edX, Udemy, Udacity, but apart from that, there's plenty of other competition when you think about the landscape of higher education, and you think about all the offers that are out there that exist from other organizations. You think of the PMP certification. You think about a lot of these developer boot camps. And of course, you have the more traditional forms of education like university degrees and whatever other offerings that universities might have. And then of course, there's free content from companies like Khan Academy and YouTube for that matter. And as far as competition goes, I do really focus on universities because what's actually happening here is because Coursera is offering these options at much more affordable prices, you may think it's inconceivable given that the tuition cost for four-year universities has continually increased for many, many years, significantly outpacing inflation. But I'd argue that if offerings from Coursera or from other companies in that space gain traction, universities will be forced to rethink how they price their degrees because now they're being challenged by the value of other degrees that are perhaps less expensive, online degrees, certificates, master tracks, etc. So there's a lot of competing offers that if universities drop their tuition prices, that's going to make the landscape for education all the more competitive. So what are the risks for this company? And for that matter, what are the risks for you investing in this company? Well, I just alluded to one a moment ago, and that's really the competition in the market from so many alternatives, such that if Coursera comes in with low price offerings, you have companies like edX also with similar offerings at affordable prices. You have universities potentially crossing fingers that they also drop their prices. And then you have, again, many more alternatives beyond that. But if prices are driven down across the board, that's one less advantage that Coursera has. The second risk I see is the validity of these certificates or these master tracks. And the question is, in the long term, will there be a growing acceptance of these certificates or of these master tracks as a viable alternative to a four-year degree? I'd argue today it's a really good supplement, these certificates, these master tracks. It's a good supplement to if you already have a degree, and depending on certain cases and industries, sometimes these certificates can be good enough to get you a job without necessarily having a degree in that particular field. But the true test is whether it can really effectively replace a traditional degree. If it can't replace a four-year degree, then the upside for Coursera is a little bit more limited. They'll have to rely more on their partnerships to offer certain degrees, which in that case gives a little bit more leverage for the universities because they're looking for partners like Coursera or edX or anywhere they can host their content. So Coursera will be in a much less advantageous position compared to if their certificates and master tracks end up doing really well, end up being viable alternatives to degrees. At that point, universities will want to partner with Coursera because they don't want to necessarily be competing. They want a piece of whatever Coursera is able to offer in the way of a really good usable platform for students. And for many universities that don't yet offer online degrees, this is going to be possibly one of the easier ways to move in that direction because they don't have to invest as much in terms of IT resources to develop this platform on their own. They can of course leverage Coursera's platform. And then there are some other risks related to government and regulatory, and I'm speaking more from a US-centric perspective. The interesting thing is that there's a really big market out there for what Coursera has to offer. In fact, the bulk of the demand for Coursera's offerings are outside of the US. So whatever issues that may arise in any one particular country, not as big of a challenge because Coursera is diversified across a lot of geographies. So do I think it's worth investing in? Now, I normally don't like to give a yes or no, but what I will say, it's definitely something worth looking into. But if or when the price gets bidded up dramatically, it's going to make the upside look a little bit less, and the overall value proposition here is a little bit less attractive. The current valuation seems pretty good to me, and like I've mentioned before, I've used Coursera for a number of years. I've had a really good experience with it, and the degree that I'm currently pursuing now, my MBA with the University of Illinois, that's partly done on the Coursera platform. And again, the whole experience has been really fantastic. And I see them in a really good position with all the partnerships they have with many universities, and not just universities, but also organizations like Google, IBM. They partner with these organizations in the same way that they partner with universities to help them offer degrees on their platform. They do so with organizations to help them create content around certain skills. And one good example is the Google Career Certificates that they just launched a handful of new ones, which you can check out that video. I've posted one below talking about that in a little bit more detail. But having these partnerships are really critical for the success of Coursera in the content that they have to offer and the weight that some of these brands that they partner with carry. Combined with the great user interface, the different priced offerings, there's a price point for every learner, and their massive 77 million user base. It's a really good position to start from going public, and the future looks pretty prosperous for them, assuming they can eventually get their cost in order so that they eventually become profitable. And if they can continue to expand their partnerships with universities and organizations and become the de facto platform for offering content delivery and eventually other functions as well, I can see them even supplanting legacy edtech companies like Blackboard instead of using Blackboard, which, believe it or not, still used quite a bit. And it's a really outdated user interface in my opinion. I feel like Coursera is in a good position to replace that. So I hope this analysis gives you a little bit more context on Coursera as a company, what some of the early financials tell us, and then also what the future of the company might look like, and then what some of the risk factors are. At the end of the day, you have to do your own due diligence when it comes to investing. Don't just watch this video, consume more content, learn a little bit more about it. I'm not a financial advisor, so again, whatever decisions you make from an investment standpoint, just make sure you do your research. So with that said, thank you for watching, and I'll see you around.